Welcome back to Pivot Points. I'm your host, Dave Allen, founder of Brand Pi, the brand consultancy working with businesses to deliver impact at pivotal moments in their journey. Walking into something you don't understand is not a punishment, it's a gift. One of Kevin O'Neill's formative roles was an epiphany, that everything you know for certain can actually be false. With a long and remarkable career in executive search, Kevin's dedication to unlocking the full potential of today's leading organizations is unparalleled. This is despite, in his words, missing life's instruction manual. But what he writes in his own manual is worth its weight in gold. Join us in conversation with the co-founder of Acertitude as we discover the shortest route to getting what you want, the 3 killer questions that everyone should ask themselves, and why you're at your best when you get out of the way. Welcome to Pivot Points, Kevin. Absolutely thrilled to have you on Pivot Points, and with your expertise and knowledge of executive search, I'm really looking forward to talking to you today about leadership. Just to get the ball rolling, would you mind introducing yourself and just giving our listeners a little bit of your background?
Sure, Dave. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, and it's great to see you again, and glad you're looking so well. I'm Kevin O'Neill. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Acertitude, and we are a global executive search firm that works primarily in the private equity space, helping private equity investors build portfolio company leadership teams, as well as on their own side, grow their operating capabilities. New York-based, we have a presence in the UK, and we work globally. Just delighted to be here. We have a team that does terrific work wherever we're called to do so.
Brilliant. I mean, you must have had quite an interesting journey to getting to the point where you started your own firm.
Well, interesting is a great word. I hear it's not a great word to use when you're at an art gallery and you're speaking to the artist. But not unlike that, when looking at one's history or their track record, interesting can be a positive, it could be a negative, it could be somewhere in between. Mine, I'm not sure what interesting is, but it's the one I found, and maybe I take you back in time a bit. I came from a family that was not a business family. My father was a World War II veteran, kind of one of these greatest generation guys who came back from the war, and started a family, obviously with my mom. 6 kids. I'm the 5th of 6 kids. My father chose education. He became a university professor. In that day and age, mom was home with the 6 of us, and my younger brother and I were on the tail end of that herd and that loud family. But there wasn't really a business sort of slant or bent, I should say, in the family whatsoever. But there was a sense that I was part of something, right? The family, the name meant something. We didn't have a lot. We weren't certainly a wealthy family. In fact, we were, quite the opposite. But we had a sense of who we were, and it was instilled in us that the sense of being competitive and standing up for what we believe in, and so forth. Now, I did have a couple of uncles on my mother's side and my grandfather on my mother's side who were businessmen and were successful. And I would see them come over for Christmas or Easter or other times, and they had nicer cars and they dressed better, and they actually seemed to have some pretty good life or pretty good lives, belonged to the country club and such. And we weren't seeing that in my home. So I guess envy or kind of aspiration as a young guy, I wanted to be more like them in a sense. And however, I went to college to kind of not really certain what I wanted to do. I thought maybe be a lawyer because I figured I knew how to talk, and that was something that lawyers did frequently. I didn't realize that lawyers also read and wrote a lot, which seemed less appealing to me at that point. So I went to college to study politics or political science, as it was then, and thinking that would end up in a law degree, but it really didn't end up working out that way. So I don't necessarily want to hijack your fun fact, which kind of is part of the story here now. So I'm not sure how we...
Well, let's go on to your first sort of role in business. I mean, where did you choose to go?
Yeah, so I was a kid who was always kind of selling something, right? I was the if I would knock on the neighbor's door, they'd say, "Okay, Kevin, what is it today?" Whether it was Cutco knives or raising money for the American Heart Association or some sort of thing. I was called to kind of connect and use my perhaps social skills or my persuasion skills, which I think as the fifth of six in my kind of pretty large, loud, boisterous family, you needed to use your persuasive skills, usually just to get fed, actually. But in any case, I was always selling something. And so when I came out of college after four not illustrious years, I found myself interviewing for roles that were sales oriented. The first job I was offered out of school was actually with Gallo Wine, E&J Gallo Winery,
Oh, wow.
which
Yeah.
had a yeah, I didn't accept it. And it was in Los Angeles, and I guess I wasn't ready to make that move at that point in time. But the bottom line was I was offered a role from them early on in my senior year, my fourth year of college, and but while I didn't accept it, being part of that interview process with them tuned me into that world, right? So I ended up going to work for a small company that was part of the DuPont network, the global chemicals business. And it was a small business in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I was actually called to go there because of a girl. And how many decisions have we made in our lives because of that? But that was her hometown, and went to work selling foam and insulation, which was something I knew nothing about. Started my career in the Midwest, and candidly, I was kind of like a fish trying to climb a tree. But in any case, that was my non-illustrious start to this career, working for a company that was selling to the furniture industry and the automotive space and the marine industry, actually, the boating space uh, back in the late 80s.
And were you a good salesperson?
Terrible, absolutely terrible. I was, in fact, my boss loved me, and I'm not sure why. And he was this great old guy, and I quoted him yesterday, and he's been dead for 10 or 15 years now. But he saw something in me, and I was absolutely horrible. I was actually one of these kids who it was like I was absent from class on the day that life's instruction manual was passed out. I had many of the exterior things. I could walk and talk fairly well. I had I think, a reasonably good image as a guy that that age, and was athletic and good spirited and such. But I just was not able to execute. I was not able to get things from point A to point B. I was a great starter, but I did not know how to finish. So I had all of the prospects and activity, but I was not able to convert that actually into real world revenue for this business. And this guy, he took me under his wing and asked me three questions. He said that he uses these three questions when he's ever confronted with a difficult decision in his life. And I said, I quoted him yesterday. And those three questions are: is it real? Can we win? And is it worth it? What he was asking me to do was assess whether I was the right guy in the right place there. If this was the role that I could actually be passionate about, find something that I could sink my teeth into and give that extra bit of Kevin to. And the fact is, I couldn't see it. I just could not see that this was real. I didn't see that I could win, and I didn't even know if it was going to be worth it for me or for them, by the way. And so that's my start. After about a year, I moved on to a entirely different business, which informs what I'm doing today.
Right. And so when did you sort of discover executive search or your gift for that?
So I had a college fraternity brother who was a couple of years ahead of me, who his second role out of school, he joined a firm in Philadelphia that was in executive search. Now, I had no idea what executive search was,
Mm.
but This guy, listen, he was a high achiever. He was the class president of our college, and he was going to this firm, and I wasn't sure I wanted what he had, but I was certain I didn't want what I had at that point in time. And so I reached out to him. Actually, it was kind of a long, like 3 day weekend. This is around the same time that my boss and I in Michigan were having this "is it real" conversation. So I kind of skipped town, went to Philadelphia for 3 days, and I was able to coerce my college fraternity brother to get me an interview with this firm. And I did, and they offered me a job, which precipitated my move from Grand Rapids, Michigan to Philadelphia to join a company in an industry that I didn't understand, that I knew nothing about. And that was 1989.
So that's either very brave or very foolish.
Listen, I what's that shirt from the Texas bar that you see, is when you've got nothing, you've got nothing to lose, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah, it wasn't as if there was there was a lot riding on that decision. There was no family, and there wasn't a mortgage. There wasn't even a car, actually, and there certainly wasn't a dog. So it was just me, and it was a decision that I don't know whether I was pulled to it or pushed towards it. But the bottom line is I ended up in Philadelphia interviewing with a company called Fox Morris, and convinced a guy by the name of Tom Glenn, who has also since passed away and is one of my great luminaries in my life, that saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, to hire me, to hire this kid who knew nothing.
mm.
So I joined a company of about, I don't know, 225 employees that did executive, well, it did recruiting, and it did some executive recruiting. And what I found was that walking into something that you don't understand can often be a great gift. Because what I've learned in life is the things that I understand and know for certain often aren't true. So instead of following the standard protocols that these industry folks, these folks have been doing it for years or decades in many cases, I kind of charted my own course and decided that the best way to build a business that involves people is to connect with people. And I remember the look on my colleague's face, including my first manager, when I went out on a sales call. And I think that they thought I was just like, I wanted to go home early or something. It wasn't a legitimate meeting, because people at that point in time were not really doing face-to-face meetings in our world. It was very odd to me. But in any case, I went out on a sales call by myself, and I came back from a meeting with 8 assignments, 8 search assignments, because I was too dumb to know that you're just supposed to ask for one. You weren't just supposed to ask for one. I asked it was, I guess, an HR director, and then there was a person running the business, what their greatest needs were, what was keeping them up at night. And I don't know why I was inspired to ask questions such as that. And they told me in no uncertain terms that they had these 8 open positions that they were having a hard time filling. And I said, well, that's what we do. Let's do it. And they agreed to give me and my firm a shot. And I went home or went back to the office. I don't think I went back that day. I think it was late afternoon, but I went back the next morning with what was called job orders back in those days for 8 assignments for this company. And I didn't know how we were going to execute them. I had no idea. I had never executed a search before, but I did what has actually been part of what I've done now for a few decades, and that is to surround myself with better people than me who know how to do things that I don't know how to do, and build a team that can deliver. And my boss looked at me as if, I had 2 heads. He said, "This is really not how we operate. We're not sure if we can accommodate that many assignments." But that's how it started. And within about a year, I was I was never the top producer in that firm, because there was one crazy lunatic of a guy that I don't think he had a personal life. It's all he did was work. Uh, but I was frequently the second highest producer in that firm as a kid who truly did not really know what I was doing, and that's how it started.
I have this phrase, Kevin, which is, I do my best work when I don't know what I'm doing. And it's something I've found time and time again. And it sounds like you have the same capability, same ability.
I'm not sure if I have the same capability or ability, but I certainly have the same realization.
Yeah.
I do my best work when I don't know what I'm doing. And it doesn't mean that or I in this case don't have expertise of some sort, right? You certainly, as you know, do the laps and the cycles, you learn how to do things, and you learn how to do things well and better and such. But what I've learned is I walk into every conversation trying as hard as I can to have a blank slate, to not bring my old ideas to that conversation, to listen and to connect, not by being the loudest voice in the room, but being the person that is able to truly hear what people are saying and synthesize that into a way that, first of all, I can understand, and pretty quickly align around some solutions. And it's funny. I mean, how many times have we walked into, whether it's a doctor's office or an attorney's office, and they have the diagnosis before they've actually heard the story, and frequently they're wrong. So I don't think there's any brilliance in any of my story that's my own. I think that on my best day, I get myself out of the way, my own ideas out of the way, so that I can reflect the light, the better light that's coming typically from somewhere else, right? So I think I align very, very closely with your sentiments there.
And huge pivot to start O'Neill Consulting back in 1996. What got you to do that?
Well, so I spent a few years in that recruiting business, in that search business, and was recruited out by a client actually. And I went to work on Wall Street for two different investment banks, and I learned a lot in those experiences. One thing I learned is that if you're at the end of the line, other people are making decisions far down the road that can affect you dramatically, and you can be very surprised. So I was actually caught in a bit of a crisis because I was with a firm called Kidder Peabody, which was owned by GE Capital. Let's just say it had one of the early scandals. And thankfully, I was not involved. I didn't know what a scandal was. I wasn't probably been smart enough to execute the scandal that what was there. But the bottom line is GE was hoodwinked, and Jack Welch was the CEO, and Jack Welch did not like to be hoodwinked. And he went from being the wizard to possibly the goat in a very short period of time over this Kidder Peabody issue, which really candidly had nothing to do with Jack Welch or GE in many ways. It was a firm that was kind of poorly run and had a lot of folks that were fudging numbers. So bottom line is Kidder Peabody was sold, and I found myself in a position where I could accept a role that I didn't want to accept with the firm that bought us, or go back home to Rhode Island from, I was living and working between Philadelphia and New York at the time, go back and work in Rhode Island where summer was coming and there was a spare bedroom at mom's house. And I took the latter because it seemed like the best way to have a summer. And so it was a great decision. So I went back to Rhode Island unemployed, without a thought as to what I was going to do, but I figured I would take the summer to do it. And had a number of conversations over the course of that summer with people that I respected, who I'd kept in touch with, and decided to start a firm not unlike the firm I was with in Philadelphia in executive recruiting at the time, what we call executive search now. And that was the seed of this. And it was in a spare bedroom. My biggest investment, first investment, was buying a laptop computer, which I didn't know how to use, because back in the day, there was one computer in the office for that firm I worked for. We were very, very. It was a manual process. We learned how to do the work actually, which was the telephone. So my first investment was a laptop computer in a spare bedroom, and from that little start, Acertitude in a very meaningful way, I guess, was spawned. And it wasn't a straight line. Let's put it that way. There are many stops and starts here.
Yeah, and I mean, when you started, did you visualize what you wanted it to become, or were you just, yeah, I'll do anything for money sort of mode?
We'll work for food.
Yeah,
It's sometimes hunger is a great motivator, Dave. It was one of these things. I don't want to say I was not well coached as a kid, but I was probably somewhat uncoachable, and I wasn't necessarily listening to a lot of the coaching that I was receiving. So consequently, I didn't find myself in a place where I had plenty of options then. So I took what I thought was the path of least resistance, which is I reached out to, I think it was 5 people that I had known from my prior life, that firm in Philadelphia, who I maintained contact with. And I asked them a couple of questions. I started by saying, listen, I'm thinking about starting an executive recruiting firm. I think that's a good idea. Second question is, do you think the market's right for that now? Is it the right time for that? I heard some yeses. And then the final question, which was the really bold question for me at that point in time, is, if I do that, can we work together again? Would you invest in me? And I got 5 yeses.
wow.
So there are so many people in my life who have stepped up at some point and invested in me at times when I didn't really deserve it, that have been those pivot points for me,
Mm.
right? And 3 of those 5 people I'm still in touch with today, fairly close contact with, and that is 30 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, you maintained relationships, and that's an important phrase. And I'd love to get your perspective on how important maintaining and having relationships is in building a business.
I learned something from my mother early on, and I never liked it really back then. I'm not sure if I like it now, but I learned it from her. And that is that you never go to someone's home unannounced or with empty hands. My mother is a product, Depression era Scottish mother, had a first generation Scottish mother. So there's a frugality and a practicality that was instilled in me. And in some way, I think that is how I have viewed relationships, that you never show up uninvited and you never show up without something to bring, to offer. So there's a lot of emphasis in this world now on getting what we want. And I'm as guilty of having wants as the next guy. One thing I've learned is that the shortest distance between those 2 points of where I am right now and getting what I want is usually giving somebody else what they want, providing something to them that is meaningful. It's not a quid pro quo. It's doing it for fun and for free with no expectations. And as a result of that, and they're small, simple, and sometimes meaningless kind of acts, right? But because of that, I have found that over time, I've been overpaid. That what comes back to me as a result of that, what can I give? What can I bring? I'm truly the product of my upbringing, and that is, you know, give more than you take. When I put my head on my pillow every night, I do an inventory, and I ask myself if I gave more today than I actually took.
Mm.
And some days I don't like the numbers. Some days I don't like the way it lines up. And the next day I have to step up and kind of do better.
That's lovely. And so how did Acertitude come about?
So Acertitude is, from my perspective, and you should ask Rick DeRose for his. my perspective on why Assertitude came about. Because listen, I was actually doing just fine, right? I was, by all standards, I had a great life, family, kids, kids in good schools, house, belonged to the country club, like my uncles, in fact, the same one. But I felt this thing that I was missing, and that is like I don't like to be alone. I mean, I don't mind being alone anymore. I don't mind spending time with myself, but it's more fun when I win together as part of a team. And it's one of those seconds and inches sort of things, in life that I've learned to pay attention to these crazy little patterns that many people call coincidences. I just think that they're kind of the kind of this life, this embroidery of life that like kind of underpins the golden thread of where I am now, where I'm going to in the future, and where I've come from. But I was invited to a conference in Las Vegas, of all places, and you don't usually hear great stories coming out of people going to Las Vegas. Usually, it's they lose the house and and such. But I was invited to a conference for executive search professionals put on by a vendor to the industry, a technology vendor. And I had never been to an executive search conference before. I don't think I'd met, besides my prior life in Philadelphia, over the last 15 years, I don't think I'd met 5 executive search people, because why do I need to connect with them? They're not my clients. They're not going to be candidates for roles. They're kind of, I don't want to say they're the enemy, but they're the opposition. So I ended up going into what I kind of perceived in a way as hostile territory. And I decided I would give it a shot and listen to what some of these folks had to say on stage. And in one of the early sessions, there was a gentleman who we both know who was leading an event about how to turn your practice, and he emphasized the word practice, into a sustainable firm, into a real firm, into a company. Because I was like many folks, I wrongly believe that I actually had a business, but a business isn't a business if when you decide to retire or something happens to you, and the lights get turned off, like the thing ceases to exist, right? It has to be something that has a life beyond you. So I sat in this session with Bob Benson, and he had this young guy on stage, a month younger than me, and they were talking about how Rick DeRose had worked with Bob to put the building blocks in place to transform his practice into a legitimate business that was sustainable, that could outlive him, that had a culture of its own, that was a place that people wanted to come to work, and that clients could feel and touch, that was more than just him. And I sat there as a skeptic, and within 10 minutes of them speaking, my eyes were as big as saucers. My mouth was probably agape. I felt like they were just talking to me. And I rushed the stage afterwards. I said, I need to talk to you guys. And that's how the relationship with Rick started. And Rick and I, about 2.5 years later, went live with Acertitude. But it was a relationship that actually we built together to see if our values aligned, whether we really thought there was a market opportunity to do things differently, to do things boldly, and to answer what we were hearing from the market, that clients were not fully satisfied with what they were getting from this industry, that decisions were being driven down and work was being driven down to the lowest level associate on the team, that partners would sell work and they would disappear, that there was no original research. There wasn't a commitment to doing great work and doing it quickly. So clients were feeling that they were no longer in the center of the equation. And Rick and I, kind of, whether we had some naivete or whether we were spot on, history will tell. But we thought there was a market opportunity to kind of return to the future, go back to the future, with traditional search art, as Dave Allen might say, the magic of search, and leveraging the science, the technology as well, which is the the logic, right? So the logic and magic of search living together and growing as technology innovates and drives change, and maybe not being on the bleeding edge of that, but being fast followers on the tech front, but really focusing on the people, starting with the people that we hire, hiring for values, hiring for, let's call it intellect, but perhaps in many ways not even traditional intellect, street smarts, commitment. Generally speaking, we're not hiring the folks that were born on third base and congratulate themselves for hitting a triple, to
Mm.
use US baseball metaphor. But so the folks that have worked in their lives and have a perspective, and they know what commitment means, because clients are not disposable to us. Relationships are not disposable to us. And we went live, shoot, it was almost 11 years ago. June 16th will be 11 years that Acertitude turned the lights on.
That's fantastic. And now you've created Acertitude, and I think you've just recently been recognized as one of the top executive search firms, which is a great accolade. When you look forward, how do you see all of the changes in technology affecting your business? And maybe that's too big a question to end on, but I'd love just your top line thoughts of how you see AI particularly sort of helping you, and whether you think it even will.
So, listen, AI is here, it's real, it's part of our lives, and it will continue to impact most aspects of kind of human existence, probably for as long as this Earth continues to revolve around the sun. I had a conversation with somebody who's a luminary technology executive who's become a dear friend, who honestly, it was one of these I'm scared conversations. This is a year and a half ago or so, and it's the gloom and doom. I think I had heard Elon on a podcast, or a bit of a podcast, where it was literally talking about the world being essentially taken over by AI, and the end of the human race as we know it, and the disruption and in every kind of space that you can imagine. And so I called this close confidant, who is literally in many of those conversations, those most important conversations around this topic. And I said, am I in the wrong business? Should we consider something else? I mean, I really like to fish. So maybe a fishing guide or something. And he started to laugh, and he said, disruption has been occurring since the human created the wheel, or harnessed fire. And such will be the case with AI. He reminded me of who I am, which is, I think, a really important thing that we need to do for others, is to remind them frequently of who they really are. And he said, you're not a coder or a programmer or a data guy, and your clients don't pay you for that. What your clients pay you for is being their alchemist, their leadership alchemist. Things are coming at them from 1,000 different directions as it relates to their human capital needs, or operating their business needs, or such, helping them distill, synthesize and distill what's important from what's noise. He said AI is not going to do that for them. There will always be limitations that allow you and people in your industry who are good at this to not only survive, but to thrive. And it will create more opportunity to really do that art of the business, to do that magic of the business that you talk about, which is two people, sitting together and solving problems. And
Yeah.
usually that starts with listening.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that he relieved all of my anxieties about AI, because listen, we've been on this podcast for 45 minutes, and things may have changed since we started the call in terms of what disruption is occurring. But I'm confident that the place that we find ourselves at Acertitude and other firms that have continued to build and invest in the relationships and knowing their clients, that there is not only a future, but there's a bright future. It's certainly going to disrupt part of the world, part of the industry. And we've seen some of that. But listen, we saw that with LinkedIn too, 15 years ago. So there's been a constant move here to transform. And I'm confident that we are exceptionally well positioned to not only kind of ride the wave, but actually have fun doing it.
That's brilliant. It's a lovely positive note to end the conversation on. And when we do pivot points, we always try and end on a little bit of a fun fact. And you've got a lovely fun fact. And maybe just sort of talk a little bit about how long it took you to actually graduate.
Oh boy, you talk about my college degree.
Yeah.
So I will tell you that this is a fun fact as we sit here in June of 2026. This was not a fun fact of mine for a long time.
I
And that's
bet.
how life is frequently. That, what is a fun fact today was not a fun fact. It was actually a very painful fact that I tried to avoid for a long time. See, I as mentioned earlier in this podcast, I was, the fifth of six kids. We were the poorest family in the wealthiest neighborhood in town, and uh, when I went away to college, I barely knew how to tie my shoelaces. I would tell you, it was, but I showed up in this small private college who took a chance on me. It's really because the basketball coach wrote me a letter. I even knew about this school, 750 miles from home on the West Virginia border. I walked into the student center on my first day on campus, and it said, "Welcome to Marietta, Ohio. Please set your clocks back 25 years." And it was this was the 80s, and Marietta College was a really special place. But I candidly, I was an immature kid who, the second day on campus, I found the fraternity that had the most fun, the largest fraternity that had the biggest parties. And I would tell you that all of my plans changed then, because I was a guy that uh, I invested in the social aspects of college. I did it very, very well. My senior year, as my senior year like happened upon me, it was, I think, maybe January of that year. My advisor, who I think I had seen twice, which was probably once more than I saw the library, my advisor sat me down and said, "Mr. O'Neill, um, we have a bit of a problem here." And I said, "Oh, Dr. Hill, what's the problem?" He said, "Well, you're scheduled with the class here, to graduate in May, but you're 21 hours short." And I said, "Okay." I was always an optimist. This must be something we could do here. And he said, "You know what we call somebody who's 21 hours short, don't we?" And I said, "No." He said, "A junior." He said, "You're not graduating. You're not walking. You're not getting the empty diploma cover with no diploma in it. Uh, we don't do that for people who are 21 hours short. So you're done." So I sat on the field on a hillside overlooking the bowl where my graduating class, 150th graduating class of Marietta College, proceeded, or processed, I should say, with their caps and gowns. I sat wearing t-shirt, shorts, flip-flop with a beer in my hand, and I watched them start their lives while I kind of developed a resentment for this place, and didn't have any money. So me going, and the idea of a super senior was not really something that was talked about then. So I just decided it was time to go out in the world, and I just acted as if I was degreed. Funny, the places I went didn't really ask. They just saw 4 years at a school, and I just didn't talk about it. And to be honest with you, it was never an issue for me until I had another pivotal moment in my life in 2004, because I was one of these guys that was drinking far too much than somebody in my position should be drinking, and I found myself in a place where it was time to end that parade. So I got sober in January of 2004, and as I started to do an inventory of my life, I realized I had some unfinished business. Now, it took me 5 years to get there. So I picked up the phone, somewhere around 2009 or 10. And because this thing was gnawing at me, partly because I had 4 kids who were starting to get to that age where we're discussing, high school. And then I knew what came after high school, college, and so forth. I did not want to be the father that had not fulfilled his commitments. So I picked up the phone and I called the registrar at this tiny little school in Ohio, Marietta College. And I said, "You wouldn't remember me. I used to be a student there, Kevin O'Neill." They said, "Oh no, we remember you. You owe us money." I said, "I owe you money." And they said, "Yes, you never paid for your last semester," which was back then, go figure, it was like $3,000. But with interest and penalties and such, and we've been trying to reach you for 20 years, it's $30,000.
Whoa.
So I said, "Listen, I don't know what the right answer is here, whether it's 3,000 or 30,000. I said, "Well, why don't you tell me what I owe you? And I'm going to pay it. But I want a commitment from you that I can enroll and I can finish my degree and become a graduate of Marietta College." And they said, "We'll get back to you." They came back to me and they asked me if I would settle for $10,000. And I said, "Done." I wired them the money and I enrolled. And I will tell you that I completed those 21 hours. I did it through the good graces of some professors who, once again, some people who took an interest in this guy who's, married, father of 4, running a business, ran for state senate in Rhode Island at the same time, by the way. And I completed those 21 hours in just under 2 years. And my graduation originally was on Mother's Day weekend of 1987. And everybody in my family kind of thought I graduated because I didn't talk them out of it. My grandmother sent me a $500 graduation check, which I cashed at the local bar. So 25 years to the day, Mother's Day weekend, 2012, I brought my 4 children, wife, and my mother.
That's brilliant.
To Marietta, Ohio, where they watched this old guy in cap and gown receive a diploma. And that's not quite the end of the story, even though I think it would be a pretty cool story right there. I was reached out to by the alumni department, obviously. Listen, I was an alum who was actually making a living, go figure. Of course, they're going to reach out to advancement and alumni. So I made some donations to the, some actually not very big, but to the annual fund, and tried to become a good citizen there again. And shortly thereafter, they asked me to join the board.
That's fantastic.
And I became a trustee of this school, this small private college dealing with all sorts of fascinating and difficult issues in Appalachia, by the way. And I just finished my 10-year stint. I term limited out last month. In fact, I'm done this month. My last board meeting was last month, where I was elected to be a trustee emeritus. So life has a way of coming around, and so I'm not sure if that's a fun fact. It's probably one of the most important things I've ever done, which is to honor that commitment, to be willing to be a little bit embarrassed by, kind of saying, "Hey, listen, I didn't go through this properly. I did not do it well then. Invest in me again." And I'll tell you, this school did that. They invested in me. I hope I have, in some small way, repaid that to them, and I hope to continue to do so. But that is such a life lesson for me and for anybody who I know, my children for sure, that this world is a really good place surrounded by good people who want to help you.
Mm.
You have to ask. Frequently, you have to have something in your hands too, just to ensure that it's not a one-way street. But the circle continues to turn, and here we are decades later, when now I have a fun fact, which was, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, that would have been a very non-fun fact. So
thank you. I mean, thank you for telling
see what you do with that mess there. So
no, that was a lovely story. Lovely story. Thank you, Kevin. I mean, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you today, and I knew I would enjoy it, and I really did enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pivot Points. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more fascinating conversations with industry leaders in our previous episodes. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about Brand Pi and how we deliver impact in the pivotal moments that matter to you, head over to brandpi.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.